What is up, y'all, and welcome back to the channel. This week we are continuing on our LS3 Supercharged C10 Project Dime Bag. You guys are probably wondering where that supercharger is. Well, UPS just dropped off a couple packages, so let's get these puppies opened up.
The time has come to start working on our engine bay. One of those things that's going in the engine bay is our awesome Whipple Superchargers that's gonna go on top of our Crate GM LS3 engine, because you know, no build in this shop would be right without a power adder. We've gone with the 3-liter Whipple Supercharger. This is kind of old trusty. We've used Whipple Supercharger on 2 of our other builds. This one, we've gotten an awesome black finish to go with all the black accessories in the engine bay. And before we get started and installing it, we have some stuff that we have to do to prep it to make sure it's ready to get installed. There's a lot of disassembly. You basically have to break down the whole supercharger. There's tons of O-rings on the inside that have to be installed, and fittings as well, to make sure we get the right vacuum references. And we also have a couple supercharger pulleys to choose from. We're gonna start on the big boy first, and then we'll see. Maybe we'll turn this one up. So I'm gonna get these things unpackaged, make sure we have all the components to get the job done, and then we'll get this thing installed on the engine. So I've got the supercharger disassembled to get all the O-rings and all the other fittings installed. This is the bottom base plate, which bolts onto the cylinder heads, and it houses all the injector bosses. And you can see the massive size of the plenum. Tons of compressed air from the twin screws can push into here. Huge amount of volume. And then the second portion of it is the intercooler. So the intercooler is integrated inside the supercharger, which is really cool because it saves a lot of space in the front of the vehicle that you're gonna install it on. So, and also saves from all the piping that would be associated with having an external air-to-air or external water-to-air style intercoolers. And then the third part, which is the top side, which is gonna have your inlet, our throttle body bolts onto right here. And then you can see underneath, these are the large screws that ingest all the airflow and then compress it into your big plenum here. Right here at the front, this is a bypass valve. So anytime that the throttle is closed and there's any residual compressed air inside the plenum, it can push back and recycle into the intake. Yeah, so that's kind of the breakdown of the Whipple Supercharger. You can see I've got the bottom base with all the O-rings already installed. Now I'm gonna go and install the intercooler portion, get all the fittings that I need into the intercooler section, and then we'll put on the top drive unit, and that'll round off the rebuilding of this Whipple Supercharger. All right, so we've got the top section of the supercharger on. Next thing to go on are our fuel rails. With the hot rod kit that we have from Whipple, it comes with the billet fuel rails. We have the original short style LS3 injectors in 1000 cc with E85 fuel and running at about 60 psi of fuel rail pressure. We should be able to reach well over 700 horsepower, probably closer to 850 to 9, I believe, which we're definitely not going to be able to reach because we're still a stock internal engine, but we should be making well over 700 is, I believe, our goal. So we should have plenty of room to do that, and probably even switch to a bigger pulley if we wanted to, if we want to get real crazy. But got our fuel injectors. I'm going to start fitting these rails on and get this thing ready to get installed. In this Whipple kit, they give you a set of injector rings. So what these are used for or to give the fuel injector a positive stop against the intake manifold. When you put the injector in, you can push it all the way through the bore, right? And pushing it down all the way up until the actual connector where your wiring goes into. And you can see it's the body of the injector is not any larger than this hole. So it just drops all the way down in there, boom. So what could potentially happen when you put your fuel rail on, as soon as you put a bunch of pressure in it to put the engine into boost, with the added pressure, you could potentially be forcing the injector down into the bore, like so, boom, and do that. And what that could end up doing is causing a big leak at the fuel rail and just dumping the fuel out. So what these rings do, they are just larger than the diameter of the bore for the injector. As you can see, it creates a positive stopping point for the injector to come down. Once you push the rail on with the injector ring, the injector can no longer get pushed down at all, and it's completely sandwiched between the rail and the manifold. So make sure you put these guys on. It's extremely important, and honestly, it's a safety thing because you don't want to have your injectors blow out and cause a fire. The last assembly portion of the supercharger is our throttle body. Boom. We do have a couple fittings and stuff to add into here. Fittings for our fuel rails. We're running a -8, and then obviously the pulley.
On the ending of the last episode, we did make a little boo-boo, which we're gonna have to fix. But before we go pulling the cab, we're gonna go ahead and get the fenders and the core support and the hood mocked back up. We also gotta finalize the Porter-built hood hinges. And the reason why is because last night, before we left, we mocked this bad boy up. When doing so, we kind of realized that it sat pretty close to the bottom of our hood here. So before we go installing that and realizing we're gonna have to drop our motor down or do something funky, we're gonna go ahead and get that thing mocked up so we can make some adjustments if need be. I hope not, fingers crossed.
Test fit, test fit, test fit. So we just put our supercharger onto the engine. This is a standard LS3. It's a 3-liter Whipple Supercharger. We want to make sure that our hood clears our supercharger. Hopefully that we don't have to make a change to the hood, but we're about ready to mock the hood up to make sure that we don't have to cut a hole or drop the engine, or what other options are there?
Roll with no hood.
So right now we're gonna mock the hood up, make sure that we have clearance.
Do the old slide and paper trick.
I don't think it's touching, dog. It's got like maybe 1/4 inch clearance up there.
Well, we got a paper gap.
That's all we need.
Looks like we're good all the way through. So we gotta mark our hood hinges, and then I think we're Gucci. All right, we got up in there, tacked our plates onto our hood, so now we are ready to take this hood off, hopefully for the last time today. Get those plates welded up completely, and we will be ready to paint them. Look at that supercharger, man. That is sexy. Whipple, you never cease to amaze us. All right, so our mock-up stage is done. We got our hood ready to go. We got our brackets welded on. We have clearance for our supercharger, so we're good to go. At this point, we're gonna go ahead and take the truck back apart. We're gonna remove the fenders. We got a couple modifications to do for the core support to get our radiator put in. So let's get this thing apart, get it back on the lift, get the cab off, and let's keep trucking.
All right, I'm gonna get started on getting our spark plug ignition cable crimped together. I've got a nice set of Tons Performance wires here. They've got a really cool like nylon outside with a really cool design on it. They're like very old school looking, but they are built to fit. So you order the length that you need, and then you cut them down as you need it. These work great for remote locating the coils, the ignition coils like we've done on this truck. So you can see I've already got this bank already installed onto our spark plugs. Now I have to just go ahead and mark out all the lengths that I'm gonna need, cut them down, crimp on our ignition cable ends, and install our boots. I'm gonna get some nice cable organizers here after I'm finished to tidy everything up, give it a better look. But I'm just gonna route it along the frame rail here, away from where the accessory drive is gonna be, because it's gonna have an alternator down here, power steering pump. So we gotta keep that stuff out of the way, as well as all the lines here going in and out of the steering gear, going into the pump, and then off to the reservoirs. So I'm gonna get started on that. Once I get this side finished, I'll move on to the other. We've got 8 to do. All right, I'm all wrapped up with getting these ignition wires cut to length and terminated with our 45 boots down here at our coils. Next thing I'm gonna do is get some wire separators that haven't showed up yet, but just to organize these so they're not just like flowing out here. So as soon as those get here, we can be 100% done, but the cables are cut, installed, and they are ready to rock.
Okay, we're gonna start modifying our core support. We have to do a notch here, a notch here. That's where the frame is going to sit. We need the core support to go down to make the hood and fender line all equal. Then we'll move on to over here. This is where our drain for the radiator is going to sit. So we're going to cut that out. And then finally, we're going to cut a notch in here. That'll be the recess to access our radiator cap.
All right, guys, while Dave is working on the core support, I wanted to pop in and remind you guys about all that Salvage or Savage gear and all the dime bag gear we got. So head on over to salvageorsavage.com, pick yourself up some merch. And I'll tell you what, you guys go over there, buy any one piece of soft good, like a hat, a t-shirt, or a hoodie, and I'm personally gonna throw in not one, but 2 stickers for free. So hit the link in the bio, go over there, buy yourself some gear, support the content, you can't go wrong. Thanks, guys.
Now that we got our core support notched out so we could drop it down, we could start mocking up all of our coolers. So we got our radiator with our 2 electric cooling fans, we got an AC condenser, and then we have this cooler, which is a cooler for the supercharger. So this is the side, engine side of the truck. This is the front side. On this side is where the radiator will sit. We have our relief here for our cap. So we'll probably put that in first, figure out our mounts, and then we'll move to the outside. There's plenty of room between here and the grill, so you can see how far out the headlight bezel is, and the headlight's even further. So we got lots of room to mount both of these coolers on the front side. Okay, we got our radiator all mounted in. We got our brackets on either side. There's some hardware inside there. Everything's looking really nice. It's nice and tucked in, but it still has a gap all the way around, so we're not rubbing anything. So next up, we got our 2 other coolers. And this radiator actually came with these 4 mounting points, all here, with little machine screws. And figured we should probably use them. So here's our cooler for the supercharger, and if we place it right about here, you could see we got our tabs up top and on the bottom. So what I'm gonna do is lay this all in and make some 90 aluminum L brackets going up like this, and then the top part will catch a hole right there. We could weld them on to this surface and onto the bottom, and then we'll have 4 brackets, machine screws, nice and secure, and it automatically creates our air gap between this surface and this surface because these are stood off. Once this is bolted on, we go back to our AC condenser, sit right on top, and what we could do is take something similar to this, turn it sideways, have a long bracket right here, have a couple spacers on these holes, and then just send bolts in on either side, and that will hold our AC condenser to our supercharger cooler, which will be held to our radiator. So we'll have all one big cooling unit at the end. Okay, we got our supercharger cooler all mounted up. 4 points of contact right there. It's nice and sturdy. Actually still a little bit warm from all the welding. So next up is our condenser. So that's gonna sit right in front, mounting a tab off the side here. That comes out, and then we'll have a spacer and we'll catch these two tabs on the side of the cooler. And we'll have to measure the spacers so that way we have a nice gap between our two coolers. And that's about it, pretty simple. So let's start taking all these original brackets off, see if we can reuse them. If not, cut some new, maybe aluminum ones, and start mounting away. Okay, we got our condenser mounted. We made these brackets, use some machine screws to go into our mount plate here, and then we got 3 1/8" hardware with some spacers into the mount points that came with our supercharger cooler. So we did the same thing on each side, everything lined up nice, and we have a nice gap. Cardboard is still in there, so see it's probably about 3/8 of an inch or so between the coolers. Same thing when we take out the cardboard. From here, from the radiator, we'll have a nice 1/2 inch gap there as well. So that, for now, pretty much mounts everything in place. There's still room to get on all of our hoses and fittings are accessible. I tested out a fitting over here, make sure it wasn't too close to our cooler. Down here is spaced out more, so that has plenty of room. And then our other heater hose will be able to fit nicely over that. So once this is back in the car, we can decide where our lines are going to run in to our core, maybe use some of the existing holes, or maybe we need to drill some new ones. For now, everything is all mounted up. Alright, here it is, the box from Wegner Automotive. So this is our accessory drive kit. Let's see what's inside. We got everything out of the big box, and as you can see here, we have an alternator, power steering pump, AC compressor, automatic belt tensioner, a couple belts. This is all the hardware and bracketry, and this is a water pump and all of the pulleys. We also have a new dampener. We also need to have it keyed. So there's this kit here with a drill bit and some keyways. So after we install this, we'll be drilling into the face of the crank, putting some keyways in. That way, with all the extra load that the supercharger is putting on it, it's not gonna make the belt slip. So we're gonna start by pulling this pulley wheel off, and then we could use puller tools to get the original dampener off. So we got this drive kit almost all installed. We have to drill our keyway, and it's, as you can see, pretty deep inside. But other than that, everything else is looking shiny and in there. So just to review, we got our AC compressor, we got our tensioner for our accessory drive, the tensioner for the supercharger, we got power steering over here, alternator, some idler pulleys, and obviously the supercharger, we put on the bigger pulley on the top to start. Everything came together really nice. And once we get our 7-inch drill bit, we'll be able to go back, take this center bolt out, drill in our keyways, retorque the bolt, and then put on our harmonic balancer. Then both of our belts could go back on. So while we're waiting for our drill bit to come to finish our crank and dampener, we're gonna pull this Whipple Supercharger off and actually do the final install. We got all of our gaskets here, rubber O-ring gaskets, and all of our hold down bolts. We actually got in our big drill bit to do our crank face and dampener modification. So as you can see, the original drill bit here, we got an extra long version in the same diameter, and now it could fit all the way down this recessed tube to the face of the crank. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this die that will guide our drill bit through, and we're gonna bolt it in with this big fat crank bolt, and then drill into the crankface this length right here. So that's our pin or keyway, whatever you want to call it. That's gonna secure our crank nose to our dampener. And then after that's on, we actually have our 2 pulley wheels to put on to our adapter here. And that will get us all set up, and we'll be able to throw the belts on as well. Now that we got our key installed in here, retorqued our crank bolt, we're ready to put on our 2 pulleys, the supercharger belt and the accessory drive belt. Alright, there it is with the belts installed. We got our complete accessory drive unit on here, belt driven, and also our belt driven supercharger. So as you can see, supercharger belt sits behind the plane of this. So this is the rib off this dampener, and then there's the secondary pulley for the accessories. Looks pretty sweet, everything fit up really nice.
All right guys, well that's a wrap. Now that we got our accessory drive installed, we got all those belts routed, we got our core support modified, and all of our coolant system components put on that truck. Next big hurdle is our exhaust. So make sure you're liking, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on next week's action. We'll see you guys on the next one. Oh yeah, and make sure you go over to our website, check out all that cool merch. Maybe you should pick yourself up something, or maybe even your dad something for Christmas. See you guys on the next one. Peace.